Welcome to Rehash, a Web3 podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Rehash, a Web3 podcast. I'm your host, Diana Chen, and in this episode we are talking all about NFTs, the value of NFTs for creators, smart contracts, anonymous and pseudonymous culture in Web3, and a lot more with Richard, co-founder of Manifold. Welcome, Richard. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Diana. Good to be here.
So before we dive into all of those things, can you tell people a little bit about your background for anyone who's not familiar with you? What were you doing before Web3 and crypto, and how did you initially learn about crypto and get involved in crypto? And this was way back in the early days, since you're a pretty OG in crypto.
Yeah, it's actually really funny because everyone always says I'm OG in NFTs, but I'm actually pretty new to it. But I had been around in crypto for a while, and so I think my first exposure to crypto was in 2012 when I discovered what Bitcoin was. And back then, I was working as a web and mobile developer, and building kind of any sort of payment integration to any sort of platform was always a painful thing that you had to do. And so, you had to go through merchant accounts or go through PayPal. I think Stripe was just kind of getting its feet around then. And along came Bitcoin, and it was just you didn't need anyone to do any sort of financial transaction online. And just really cool because as a developer, it gave a lot of power to what you could actually do. And so, it started off as just playing off this cool technology. It was worth something back then, but not what it is today. But it was much like the Wild West, right? And so a lot of the developers who were building Bitcoin applications, they were just happy it worked. There was no bells or whistles. It was just hey, here's this cool thing I built. It works. And other developers were oh yeah, that's cool. And it felt like a very, very tight-knit community back then. And then so price went up, price went down, price went up, price went down. And I think that every single time that happens, I think there's a big shift in the mindset of how people treat crypto in general. At first it was a hobby, then it became more of a financial thing, and then it became a global financial thing. And then how I got into NFTs was that my co-founder sent me one, and I was wow, this is the big thing that consumers can actually understand, because back then it was always about just moving money back and forth. But now we had something that had a tangible value that any sort of person who collects things could understand, why you want to collect something. And to me, I thought that was really powerful. And that's how I kind of got started into NFTs.
Very cool. Okay, so eventually you went on to create Manifold. How did that idea come about, and why did you decide to build this out?
Yeah, so I started off as a collector at first, and just really, really excited about what NFTs meant for, I guess, creativity in general, right? Artists and the creative industry in general. And when I started collecting those things, I was these NFTs were just really cool to collect and look at. And as we started, interacting with artists, the one thing I realized is that artists didn't actually understand what was actually going on behind the scenes. To them, NFTs were a new way to sell, content, sell items, right? And to me, being in kind of the blockchain space for a while, NFTs were a brand new medium that was just waiting to be explored. And so the kind of light bulb went off is that when you started talking to these artists and telling them what you could actually do with the blockchain, you could just tell their brain was just I need to do some of this stuff. I need to go explore some of these ideas. And they're just looking for creative ways to integrate different blockchain concepts into the artwork itself. And Manifold is created, I guess, primarily out of a collaboration we did with Mad Dog Jones, which is called the Replicator. And so the Replicator was a conceptual art piece that could only exist as an NFT for its medium. And so the smart contract of the Replicator is linked to the artwork itself. And, there's no other medium that could express what Mad Dog Jones was trying to do with the Replicator, except for, having it be an NFT. And so that was really kind of the genesis concept behind Manifold. And from there, after doing that project with Mad Dog, we realized there was a whole bunch of technology hurdles that artists didn't quite understand, that, coming from a blockchain, gaming, and kind of product design sense, we understood that if we created some tools for these artists, that they could then take these tools to explore what they could actually do with NFTs and how to go deeper and create more rich NFT experiences. And then that was kind of the genesis behind how we decided to start Manifold.
Gotcha. Right. So I think when people think about NFTs, everybody sort of has their own idea of what makes an NFT valuable. And I'm curious just to hear your personal views on how you prescribe value to NFTs. Do you evaluate it based on whether this NFT has utility or by its monetary value? Will price go up, or is it strength of community or something else?
Yeah, well, I think it's kind of funny how I would define value of an NFT, because at the end of the day, I believe that the value of something is just what someone else is willing to pay for it. And so, the reason why we have, the value of something is because other people are just willing to pay for it, right? And so, an example of this is that, anyone could have bought Bored Ape at, less than 1 ETH, but no one really did until it started going up in price. And once it got up in price, everyone's like, oh, why didn't I buy Bored Ape, right? But the thing is, everyone could have bought it at the lower price. It's just that they didn't want to buy it until everybody else said, hey, this is worth buying. And so it became this kind of community thing where the prices started going up and up and up. And so, when I think about the value in NFT in general, there's many different ways you can parse it. But at the end of the day, it's just, what is someone willing to pay for it? And, what does that mean to that individual person? Everyone has their own motivations. Sometimes it's, I collect art for the sake of collecting art, or I think something is cool, or, but some people are just like, I just want to buy something so I can flip it. I want to buy something because of the utility to get into certain events. It's like a membership in some cases. And so there's many different use cases. And I think a lot of the value that we associate and tie to NFTs is really just based on social constructs of, what does the community think that this is worth to them? And, what can other people get out of this by collecting these NFTs? There's no easy way to define, what the value of an NFT is. It's kind of like art too, right? Like, why is art worth art? There's many different reasons, but, every single art piece has its own individual reason for why it has a price.
Yeah, for sure. So you kind of just have to find that product market fit, like find that audience NFT fit. And whether you're trying to appeal to an audience that values, education and strength of community, and you offer a lot of those things for the NFT holders, or if it's just people who really like cool art and you make your NFT like really cool art and you appeal to those people, it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, you just have to find your audience and connect with them.
And I think that NFTs have different use cases. And so I can see some NFTs that have no monetary value just being very valuable for the external reasons. Especially when you have communities that are like memberships, right? Like for status, for example, right? You could say that I have a membership that gives me status. That NFT might not even be resellable, but it gives me certain value that I say I'm a valuable member of this community, I contributed to it, and other people can recognize that I have done certain things within this community.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll probably see, I'm guessing, increasingly more of these like DAO NFTs, like NFTs that signal that you're part of a DAO or part of some sort of community, whether, that's a status signaling or it's like values signaling. Like maybe you're just signaling that I really align with this DAO or this group's values by holding this NFT.
Yeah, exactly.
So another thing I wanted to ask you sort of generally about NFTs, and I think I saw you tweet about this, maybe it's your pinned tweet right now, I'm not sure. It's about like being safe in this NFT world. And I think recently we've seen an uptick in scammers. Scammers have always been around, but recently, at least for me, I've seen an uptick in like really advanced scams. And my sister actually, who I've been trying to crypto pill for the last couple of years, she recently got scammed through this like fake Azuki account that somebody with like a big following had inadvertently tagged. Like it was just like one letter off, so they accidentally tagged it and then she clicked it and then got tricked that way. But from your view, like how can we curb these scams and make this space safer so that it feels less threatening for newcomers to enter into it?
Yeah, so I think the very first thing is just education. A lot of people jump into NFTs or crypto in general without actually getting a proper crash course about how to be safe. And so I think for me there are three basic rules. One of them is never share your seed phrase. Second one is always use a hardware wallet, and the third one is just always be mindful about what you're doing online, right? I think a lot of the scams out there are a lot of social engineering, and so it's really in a lot of cases if something is too good to be true, it probably is too good to be true. But there are some more advanced scams out there that are actually like very, very directly targeted. And to me, it's about just knowing what are the bounds of what can be done from a potential of a scam. Then that comes down to education, right? So I've been in the crypto space for almost a decade now, so I've seen like a lot of different things, and so I kind of know what to look out for. And just being in the space for a while, you hear stories, and each of these stories is something you just like put away in your mental shelf and be like, okay, this is what I need to look out for. And so, when I do things online, especially when in crypto, it's always very methodical. Like, never rush into something. Always, check, every time I sign something, I actually look at the contract addresses and see, what am I actually signing, just to make sure that, it is a valid transaction that I want to sign. But I think the broader kind of solutions to these is that we need better tooling. And, right now, the methods of interacting with the blockchain are very, very archaic in a certain sense. It's like, I think MetaMask is the default way people interact with the Ethereum blockchain right now. But even for me, every time MetaMask changes their interface, I get so confused about like what is going on here. I have to learn new jargon, new kind of terminology. And I think that for your average everyday user, that jargon is not helpful for helping them understand exactly what is going on. And so, I think that going forward, in order to be truly safe, we're going to need kind of a reimagining of how we kind of interact with the blockchain itself. And, I think this tooling and these efforts will take, probably a few years to get there. But I think that's a big kind of gate right now for onboarding people safely into crypto.
Can you help explain a little bit what is actually happening on the back end with the smart contract when we interact with contracts, say when we buy an NFT or when we try to sell an NFT on OpenSea, for example? I know this is something I got really confused with in the beginning, is like sometimes like you connect your wallet and then you press mint and then this thing pops up on your MetaMask that's like sign this, right? And it's just like a slew of like gibberish that I have no idea what that means.
Mhm.
And I click sign and like who knows what happens next. And then sometimes it makes you sign multiple things. Like if you're going to sell from a collection for the first time on OpenSea, you have to sign it multiple times. All of these things, like how is a newcomer to know, like what the hell is going on? Can you sort of explain in layman's terms, like what is actually happening in the back end of the smart contract? Because maybe understanding that will help people to understand a little better, like what all these things are that they're signing and when, there
Mhm.
might be a red flag.
Yeah. So, the way I think about the Ethereum blockchain network, or just, any blockchain in general, is that it's a public computer that everyone has access to and everyone can always see what is going on. And so what a smart contract is like a program that somebody's written and published onto the blockchain itself. And, this program has different rules kind of set on it. And anybody can go inspect these rules and it's kind of open for everyone. But no one really controls the overall system. And that's kind of like the idea behind the decentralized nature of the blockchain itself. And so you have this smart contract, and in it, you've encoded these rules. And so when you think about NFTs, there is a standard called the ERC 721 and the ERC 1155. And there is a common pattern, a common interface that any NFT will follow and implement certain features of the spec. And if they implement the spec, then you can be assured that it is most likely a valid NFT. And so a smart contract is a program that implements the spec that other people can interact with. And so when you are signing a transaction or minting an NFT, what you're effectively doing is going to this program and saying, hey, I have certain parameters and I would like to, run code on this program. The program will say, are you allowed to do it, based on your wallet? And if you are, it will kind of do the necessary actions on the blockchain, check different data, transfer funds and so on, and write the information to the smart contract itself. And so, I think one thing is that, a misnomer people think is that, when I have a wallet, people think the NFT is in your wallet. It's not in your wallet. The NFT lives on the smart contract, and your wallet just says you have access to control the data of that NFT, which is primarily just the ownership record. And so where this goes next is that when you go to somewhere in OpenSea, like OpenSea is another program that's written on the blockchain itself. Right? The actual website is a nice like front interface, but there's actually a smart contract behind OpenSea itself. And so when you go to OpenSea and say, I want to list an NFT for sale, OpenSea's contract, OpenSea's address doesn't actually have permission to access the ownership of your NFT because you own the NFT. And so what's happening is that you're telling the smart contract that owns that where the NFT lives, saying that I own this NFT and I want to give OpenSea permission to transfer the NFT on my behalf. And so that's where this kind of like permission and rule set comes into play. And then when OpenSea gets an offer or it sells an OpenSea, it's able to execute that transfer on your behalf without having you to interact with the contract again after the fact. And so that's what's kind of going on behind on the back end there. But there's a lot more nuances to that, but I'll leave it at that.
For sure, yeah. And I know, sometimes obviously what you said earlier applies, like never give out your seed phrase, but most times I think the hacks are more subtle than that. They'll just make you sign a transaction that maybe you don't know what's happening and you're actually signing away their rights to access, certain NFTs in your wallet or certain parts of your wallet. So I guess like what can people do about that other than just being extra careful and actually like reading these and trying to figure out like what you're signing for before you sign each time?
Yeah, I think there's not really much you can do at this point right now. Like I said before, the interface in MetaMask is kind of the limiting factor. There is, if you use a ledger and you actually sign through the ledger interface, there's something called clear signing. And in clear signing, it'll actually tell you exactly what action you're taking. And so it'll actually say you're about to transfer a Bored Ape to this address versus, blind signing, which is what is the current method of how MetaMask works right now. And when you blind sign something in MetaMask, it just says, just the random hash numbers and so on, right? But I think the big thing is just always making sure that you know what you're signing. Never rush into something because all it takes is just one misclick or just like one kind of hastily made FOMO decision to do something that you didn't want to do, and that could have irreversible consequences. But I don't have a good answer right now, but it really is just being very vigilant about what you do and understanding exactly what it is you are doing whenever you interact with on the blockchain itself.
Is it that hard to build something that will basically translate that hash that you sign right now into human readable language? Like instead of signing a slew of things I don't understand, just have it
Mhm.
say you are now, selling your Bored Ape, for instance. Like, is it
Yeah.
that hard to build something like that?
Well, that's what I said. That's the difference between blind signing and clear signing. So clear signing actually has that information there, but the problem right now is that, for one, it's a different security model than MetaMask provides, right? And so MetaMask actually is not quite there yet. It just needs to be kind of rehashed and completely like overhauled.
Okay. And then in terms of recourse, is there any recourse if you make a mistake and get stuff stolen from your wallet?
There is no recourse at the moment right now. Like no, I guess like no actual way you can claw anything back. The only recourse you can have right now is, probably just filing a police report and hoping for the best. But I haven't heard of a single kind of resolution of someone who's done that.
Yeah, me either. I've heard of plenty of people doing that and
Yeah.
it resulting in nothing. So, okay. So, switching gears a little bit, moving off this sort of depressing topic of scammers, I want to talk to you a little bit about creators and NFTs. Really, like what Manifold enables is it enables Web3 creators to have ownership over their creative works, right? So, my first question, I guess, is just what role do you think platforms will play in a world where creators own their own content?
Yeah. So, the way I think about NFTs in general is that NFTs are kind of distributed pieces of content that the owner or the creator of the NFT has kind of a lot of control over, right? And so I think the platforms will play a very important part in the fact that if an owner or a creator of an NFT finds value that the platform provides them, then that platform can be a facilitator of either the distribution or engagement of that content itself. And so one of the cool things about NFTs is that if I mint an NFT, it just appears on every single platform, right? Because they're all interoperable, because they use a common spec, it enables the proliferation of the content across many different platforms itself, which I think is very powerful because, there's two parts to it. One of them is it's now decentralized, and being decentralized makes it so that anybody has access to it. And the second thing is that the owner has full control over the content because they are the original creators of that content themselves. Where previously, content could get lost. You always hear about people posting other people's content on Instagram and not getting proper attribution. And so, having proper attribution and a way to kind of trace back the provenance of these goes a long way for the owners and the original owners and also the original creators of that content itself. And, I think that platforms will be able to kind of facilitate better discovery of content and have a stronger social graph that's kind of not owned by the platform itself, but owned by the creators.
Do you see in the future there being maybe a lot more platforms instead of like nowadays you have a few centralized, social media platforms, you have TikTok, YouTube, wherever where you can if you're a video creator, really you just have TikTok and YouTube. Those are pretty much your
Mhm.
only options. In the future, do you see there being more platforms so that more platforms can compete with each other and that, no central platform really ends up having a monopoly over all of the artist monetization?
Yeah, no, like I think the big thing we're seeing right now is an inversion of power, right? And so, when I think about my participant on a platform itself, let's say Instagram or TikTok, when I submit my content to one of these platforms, I'm actually giving them a full license to use that indefinitely, and they can monetize it. They can do anything they want. They can even ban the content if they wanted to. And so, as a creator, what usually happens is creators are the ones who ended up making the platforms big in the first place because they're the ones providing content. But then at some point, the content becomes, or the platform becomes too big, and they change things. So like their algorithm could change. They could do things that are not in the best interest of the creator themselves, but best interest for the platform itself. And then when that happens, creators kind of get screwed in some cases. You see this all the time on YouTube, Instagram, and even TikTok itself. And so the thing I think is going to be the big inversion, especially in Web3, is that right now we have the platform in the center, the content, and creators kind of pushing content into the platform. In Web3, what you have the creator and the content in the center, and the platforms are the spokes around it, and the creators are the ones pushing content to the platforms to consume. But at the end of the day, the creator is the one who has full control of their content and audience. And so if they want to migrate their content audience to a platform that actually provides them value, they can do so. And it's all kind of backed by, kind of Web3 fundamentals of ownership and decentralization. But in this case here, it just provides a lot more power to the creator themselves. And so, if they were to get deplatformed on one platform, since they are the owner of their content, the original content, they could just migrate to another platform. And if that platform offers a proper solution to them, it'd be really easy for them to transition. So it's really about kind of owning your content and owning your audience as a creator.
Yeah, for sure. And then speaking of, creator monetization and stuff, like what are some new creator monetization models that come about with NFTs and Web3?
I think one of the biggest things is the idea of royalties. It's like royalties have never existed before, even in the traditional art world. And so NFTs have really kind of provided this new revenue stream where, if I'm a creator, I can create content, and if someone sells that content or piece of art to someone else, I can get a kickback in the form of royalty. And this kind of makes sense a bit more too, because everything is on chain. If I were to create sort of a derivative work or a remix of this, I could actually get attribution for this that could be then kind of filtered back up to the original creator themselves. Then on top of that too, we're seeing all these sort of like new innovative business models built around Web3, especially with the idea of like, memberships, rewards, live events, merch, right? And these are all new ways that creators are able to take their NFTs and kind of funnel that energy towards different monetization strategies. I think that, if I think about what the traditional monetization strategy for creators are, it's usually ads, right? And when you think about NFTs, there are really no true NFT ads per se, because it's more of a patronage model rather than a sponsorship model.
Yeah. So speaking of ads, though, when we think about like platform monetization, how will these platforms monetize if not with the traditional ad model that we see now?
Yeah. So, part of that too is most of them, they have their fees too if you want to be on a platform itself. And, at the end of the day, I think the best platforms will be valuable, right? So it's like I said earlier, if a creator finds a platform valuable, there will be some sort of synergy between the platform itself and the creator. And there is a way for, at the end of the day, the idea is to, make sure creators win. But if creators find value in the platform itself, then they can provide value back to the platform. I think one of the big things about Web3 is that some of the traditional revenue splits are just like, are more creator friendly in these cases here. And so if you think about what traditional like ad media and ad platforms are, it's the platform will take, anywhere from 30 to 50% of revenue. Whereas, in the NFT space, it's more about, it's always been in the range of like, 5 to 10%, or even less than that in some cases here. And so I think that the Web3 model is going to be kind of a very big segment going forward, especially if the technology can get to where it needs to go. And I think that because of that, we're just going to see brand new business models that actually further creativity and provide very unique monetization strategies for both platforms and creators.
Yeah, speaking of that, what's Manifold's business model, by the way? Do you guys just take a percentage of all NFTs that are minted and sold on your platform?
So we actually take 0 fees and 0 percentages for anything that's done on the platform. The way we kind of operate right now is that we do a lot of collaborations with artists. And so these are actually like very bespoke custom projects. Examples, these ones were, the project that I mentioned with Mad Dog Jones. We've done stuff with like Fuck Render. We've done stuff with Pack, and a lot of the kind of big NFT artists in this space. And we operate just by doing everything on a partnership basis in that case. So we take a percentage of the sales of the project. We use those funds to fund kind of the other development of the tools and infrastructure that we're providing to creators and developers.
Gotcha. Very cool. And this is kind of a selfish question because we're
Mhm.
checking out Manifold right now and trying to mint our NFTs on Manifold. Are there any limitations to like what you can mint or how you can sell your NFTs on Manifold as opposed to like a custom coded smart contract? So for instance, like if we wanted to sell our NFTs as one of one auctions, can we do that? If we want to do limited editions, can we do that? Like, are there any restrictions there?
There are no restrictions. And so Manifold is pretty much a blank canvas when you think about what the NFTs are. And so, once you mint the NFTs, you can really just distribute it any way you like. So if you want to sell it at auction, if you want to sell it to a primary sale, if you wanted to give them away, it's really up to you. One of the big benefits of using a manifold contract is that the creator has 100% control over the contract itself. And so, when I say that, I truly mean it. It's like, Manifold has no ability to change anything within the contract or take away anything or even charge a fee for anything that you do on the contract itself. And, another thing too is our contracts are open source. And so, everyone has full access to, pretty much the keys to their kingdom. And so, I always like to say that, Manifold has done a good job with regards to creator provenance and permanence is if we as a company and individuals of the company disappear and Manifold were to shut down tomorrow, if the work we've done is able to live on and still be useful. And, that's the sort of lens that we kind of put things through whenever we launch, a project.
And it's simple enough for non-technical people to use, right? Like I don't know smart contracts, I don't know Solidity. I can spin up a smart contract for my NFT project there.
Yep. So if you know what you're doing, you can literally spin up a contract and deploy an NFT or mint an NFT on that contract in less than 5 minutes. It takes, I'd probably say if you're brand new to it, maybe spend about 15, 20, or 30 minutes to just get your bearings and so on. But, we designed Manifold Studio with the idea of you don't have to know anything about how the blockchain works. Well, you have to understand how to interact with the blockchain, but you don't have to actually understand the nuts and bolts behind what you're trying to do.
Very cool. Okay, cool. Well, I might hit you up for questions, but it sounds like I might not have to if it's going to be that simple. Okay, so switching gears a little bit, something else I wanted to ask you about is this like Anon culture in Web3 or like anonymous or pseudonymous culture in Web3. And I don't know if you consider yourself pseudonymous. I mean, you're clearly showing your face, but you do also always have your punk glasses on. But what's your overall take on Anon culture in Web3? Do you think it's ultimately beneficial to the growth of Web3, or do you think it's detrimental to it?
I think it's a balance, right? I think for myself first, I'm not anonymous at all. My name is literally Richard, and I bought my punk because it looks like me. That's part of the reasons why. And yeah, I'm you can find me anywhere online, right? So that's me. And I just found personally just easier to just maintain one identity. So the thing about me online is I act pretty much the exact same in real life. That's me. But I understand I do see some benefits to being anonymous, right? Especially when it comes down to security or just being able to express your thoughts freely. It's interesting for myself because I have caught myself sometimes being like, hey, I want to say something, but I probably shouldn't say that, right? Because it's either controversial or will, maybe not be taken the right way. But by an anonymous identity, I can see myself having some sort of ability to express that idea or thought, which in some cases could be a very important thought, and not have it be taken very at face value for what it is. And so I think there is a balance there. When it comes to projects, I think that it's really hard, especially if a project is anonymous, to actually build a proper roadmap and to kind of build going forward. Just because I think one of the big things in Web3 and being transparent is trust is a big factor in that. And how can you really truly trust somebody if you actually don't even know their name, right? Or even don't know anything about them. But another thing too is that it's kind of funny because it also is there also is a scenario where a lot of project founders will message me like, hey, we're a completely doxed team, right? But when you go look anything on their backgrounds, there's no history between who they are. So I don't doubt that they are who they are, but there is no sort of history behind that person or social credit that has built up that you can actually be like, hey, if this project is going downhill or is a rug, that you can actually go find them because there just is no backstory for that person. And so yeah, I think that like I said, it's a fine balance. I think that it's needed for certain aspects, but I also think that I think in the long run, most anonymous people end up just becoming non-anonymous, giving them enough time.
Yeah, I think I can really understand why some people would be anonymous from more of like a regulatory perspective. But from what you were saying about being able to say certain things as an anon and not as yourself, I guess like the counter argument to that is like, shouldn't you stand behind anything that you're saying? Or if you're trying to like say something, behind a hidden identity, then should you be saying that? Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think it's yeah. Well, it's really interesting because I think that for myself, even I have a ton of followers on Twitter, and I think anybody who has a significantly large kind of following will polarize people no matter what. And so even I have people who are just like against what I do for some reason, right? And I'll get some like hateful comments even now and then, right? Even though I try to be very kind of neutral and respectful, but it's very easy just to say the wrong thing and just someone gets offended. The internet is just full of anonymous trolls, and I think that every single outcome will happen, and because of that, you just get a lot of toxic people online, right? So I think you just have to be, for myself, I try to be very mindful about what I say, just so I'm trying to be very positive for like whoever I'm talking to.
Yeah, for sure. And then to your other point about, how it's hard for anonymous projects to really like raise capital or do whatever when they don't have a background that people can look into. The same thing is true for individual anonymous contributors. Like if you're an anonymous
Hmm.
contributor and you want to contribute to a DAO, for example, and there's no like people can't learn anything about you, then people might not trust you to have access to their treasury or even their docs or really like be part of the team. So from your perspective and from what you've seen, what are maybe some of the best ways for anons to build reputation and trust in the community?
I think the best way is just working with people, right? I always get asked like how I built my community following, right? And the little answer is just one person at a time. Back when I was had like 1,000 followers or even less than that, is really just talking to people one on one, just helping them, and just trying to learn as much as possible and just give back. And then I found that really helped me build a community and around myself, right? Around artists and other developers. And from that, I think understanding someone's motivation is also a very important part of why are they doing something. And I think that once you start to get that out there of why you're doing stuff, then it really makes it easier for other people to trust you, especially if you kind of have demonstrated over and over again that you are trying to do something that's in the best interest or aligned with other people that you are working with. But trust is one of those things that it takes time, right? It's like even when you meet a person in real life, when you first meet them, they're completely untrustworthy. We're not untrustworthy, but you have to it takes time to develop trust, right? And I think the same thing's online. Just that the method of communication is different when you're not actually having like face-to-face conversations or meeting them in person.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so switching gears a little bit, I want to get your take on just like generally the future of NFTs. So for all the naysayers right now who are saying NFTs are dead, first, can we just get you on the record saying NFTs are not dead so we can silence them?
NFTs are not dead unless you're a
Okay.
CryptoPunk zombie.
Oh shit. Okay, and then I guess like once this bear market is over, what do you predict will happen with NFTs? Like, do you think NFTs will make a huge comeback and we'll see NFTs explode again like they did last year? Or what are your predictions there?
I think the one thing about NFTs right now is that it's hard to use the technology in general. And so, everyone in the crypto space has done, a lot of training to get up to this point. We're battle tested, we're hardened, but then, trying to convince someone who's not into crypto, how to get into NFTs, it's hard. And so I think that the next iteration of NFTs will be when people can use NFTs without even knowing they're using NFTs in the back end. And so games are a prime example of this. You could kind of say that games are NFTs, just not backed by the blockchain itself. They're just database records, but really they are kind of digital assets that are owned, but just not owned by the individuals themselves. And so when you play a game, you don't think about those things, right? But there is value, there is huge benefit if those did become NFTs to both the consumers, creators, and companies that kind of create content based around these concepts. That's like one thing. I think that a lot of the speculation is going to disappear from the market. A lot of the projects that kind of did kind of blow up, or, just had these crazy boom bust cycles, they were really built on the idea of community. They didn't really focus on the other aspects of art and technology. And so, to be honest, I thought a lot of the NTR out there for these PFP projects was pretty bad. And all they were doing is just reusing contracts that had already been done before for other projects. And so there was really no art innovation there or any sort of technological innovation. It was just hey, we're launching the project. We're going to build a community. But then, when the community leaves, the whole project dies. But, if you can back something with true artistic value that has, cultural relevance and has good tech, I think that is way more lasting and way more native towards what NFTs can actually be. I think we're going to see a swing back towards one-on-one art and traditional art and artists themselves, because artists were here before the whole PFP craze. They're still creating art, and their art is their livelihood. And in that case here, they're still going to support the art. They're still going to support the collectors. And I always thought it was a shame when you have these PFP collections that had 10,000 objects, and the price of some of these PFPs were just higher than the price of these traditional artists or traditional digital artists that had amazing art who spent sometimes hundreds of hours on a single art piece. And so I think that's going to go back that way of art actually meaning something. And it's kind of like in the traditional art world itself too, right? Art is actually valuable because it's beautiful, it's cultural, it's relevant. And I think that NFT art is just another kind of example of that, just using a different medium itself.
Yeah, I guess to that point, for the PFP projects that have made it this far, for example, the punks, and I don't know if maybe you disagree, but I personally don't think the art is that great. It's just some pixels. What do you think is it about those projects, punks, apes, whatever, that have helped them to make it this far?
So punks are a very interesting thing, right? Because punks, I would say, they are the real innovators of the technology itself, right? And so before CryptoPunks came around, there was kind of NFTs in general, smaller projects and so on. But punks are really the ones who kind of defined what an NFT actually is and what identity actually is. And so, the CryptoPunks, a lot of people use them as identity. They're kind of status symbols. They are historic, right? There's a lot of rich history behind the punks themselves too. And so, I think you might think the punks are not that cool looking, but I think when I had got my punk, I was this is the coolest thing ever. I still think it's the coolest thing ever. And so, it's taste, right? Not everyone has the exact same art taste. So I think that there is a lot to be explored when you think about, what art means to everyone personally. And, I think everyone also has their very own artistic journey too. And, I think that a lot of people in the NFT space, the price of something is the biggest concern. And so, the exact same thing too. Everyone had the exact same opportunities to buy CryptoPunks at a lower price, but no one did until they just took off, right? And all of a sudden they become these iconic, sought after kind of digital relics or memorabilia, and now they're valuable, right? When I think about something like Bored Apes is a little different because they are really focused on the technology and the community. And the art's questionable too. I think Bored Apes are cool, but some of them are just okay, really. But they've really struck something cultural that you can't take for granted, because they have done things very significant and added a lot to the space too. And when I think about the technology of Bored Apes, is that they are the ones who innovated a lot of the NFT drop mechanics early on. And so, they got rid of the FOMO ramps, they did, the airdrops, they've done different sort of mechanics that were really interesting. And, from a technology perspective, I think that they really try to understand what the ethos of Web3 and really play it for that, and kind of to brand it as part of the culture of how Web3 is.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then more on the utility side of NFTs, are there any use cases for NFTs that we haven't seen yet that you hope that people will figure out in the future?
Well, there's lots of things, right? So, for example, real world land titles, for example, or I think that once we have more advanced technologies, such as when the merge happens and things become cheaper or transaction fees become cheaper, we get roll ups and zero knowledge proofs. It enables a brand new class of NFT kind of experiences that can then be utilized in for different cases here.
For sure. Okay. And then last question for you. What is one hot take you have about NFTs?
Oh man. Hot take about NFTs.
Our listeners are very nice. They won't cancel you.
I don't know if I have any hot takes. Not off the top of my head.
All right, that's fine. You can tweet it from your Anon account later.
Sure.
All right, cool.
Okay.
And then last thing we do on every podcast episode is we play a quick little game called This or That. This is
Sure.
where I say 2 words, A or B. You tell me which one you prefer. No explanation needed. The idea is to blow through this super quick. And then I've got 10 pairs of words for you. Are you ready?
Sure.
Okay, first one. Bitcoin or Ethereum?
B or Ethereum.
Okay, yeah. You can just say the word. Crypto or Web3?
Web3.
NFTs or DeFi?
NFTs.
Bear market or bull market?
Bull market.
Building or investing?
Building.
Culture or tech?
Tech.
Books or podcasts?
Books.
Appetizers or
Sorry.
dessert? It's okay.
Dessert.
Past or future?
Future.
And last one, Earth or space?
Space.
Cool. All right. Good job. Before you go, last thing, tell people where they can find you if they want to connect with you personally. And then where can people go to learn more about Manifold or to use Manifold to mint their NFT project?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter. My account name on Twitter is just Richard. It's RICHERD. And if you want to learn about Manifold, you can go to manifold.xyz as a website, or you can find us on Twitter at manifoldxyz.
Okay, cool. Thank you again so much, Richard, for taking the time to come on the podcast. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And we'll be back again soon with another episode of Rehash.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Rehash, a Web3 podcast. The guest in this episode, Richard, was nominated by Tyler Internet and voted onto the podcast by Ellie Dots, Triumph, and Andrew. Some of the questions you heard were submitted by Karsten and Tyler Internet. Rehash is hosted by Diana Chen, produced and edited by Ellie Dots and Tyler Internet, and as always, supported by Rehash DAO. To stay up to date on all things Rehash, you can follow us on Twitter at RehashWeb3 and join our Discord to get involved.